This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard, whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast. We have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show. This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Mountain Glass Arts. For the month of September 2016, Mountain Glass is offering borosilicate sale, North Star odds and seconds, 30% off. All you have to do is put in the code NSOS in the checkout. And for all you soft glass nerds, Soft Glass COE 104 sale, 30% off. Creations is messy. Just put in the code MESSY, MESSY at checkout. And for any other questions or concerns, go to mountainglass.com. That's mountainglass.com. This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by American Helix. The American Helix is a revolutionary new concept in smoking technology. Designed and manufactured by American glassblowers, this pipe is light years ahead of its time. Based on Bernoulli's principle, the shape of the pipe, along with an innovative intake system, creates a Venturi effect through precision microholes in the chamber, which results in a slower burn that conserves tobacco and gives a smooth, refreshing experience, making the American Helix the smoothest hitting pipe on the market. For further info or to locate their products, you can find them online at AmericanHelix.com. That's AmericanHelix.com. Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show, episode number 124. This is Jay Michael, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in today. With 17 years of experience behind the torch, I am as excited as always to bring you conversations with artists, sharing their stories in hopes to inspire and entertain while helping you grow your business. And today is no exception. Today we are going to be getting into a little bit of a discussion about the idea of having creative block. Basically, when you get to a point where you want to start making new things or kind of moving yourself forward as a glass artist, and you get to that point to where you get a block in your brain that doesn't allow you to become creative or to move forward and come up with ideas for some new things. And I wanted to discuss recently, share an experience that I've had through my position over at with the Rebus Brothers at Disney that really made me think about this concept, about the creative process, and as well as the last couple of interviews I've had between Mike Luna and Germ and Mike Mason, and just going back and listening to other episodes, which I do listen to the show too, even though it's me talking. I like to pretend that it's another podcast, but it's definitely something that I think is important as an artist and as a creative person in general, to understand that we do get creative blocks and that we have to find ways around that and how to get past it to be able to unlock a little bit of that space in our brain that can then become a bigger space in our brain as it evolves and grows into this thing that we end up with. The idea going from your brain as an idea to making a actual physical piece, manifestation through thought in a sense. And so I wanted to definitely kind of have a short, quick chat about that today, not too long of a rant, which I'm sure I'll probably ramble a little bit as I always do. But before we get started, I want to let you guys know that my boys over at Zen Glass Studios are holding a class coming up on September 29th and 30th, 2016, that is going to be featuring Time, and he's doing a class on working with CAD colors, dot stacks, and sculpture. Again, September 29th and 30th, and then a open gallery show on October 1st. If you want to get some information on pricing, you can contact them at zenglass.com. Also coming up on November 17th and 18th, they've got D-Rock and Casto and also Blitzkriega. The three of those cats are going to be coming in town and doing a class as well. And then they're going to be having a show on November 19th to kind of follow up. So definitely check these guys out. You can check them out on Instagram at Zen Glass Studios. You can also check them out online at zenglass.com, and I will have all their information in the show notes page. You can also go to wiseguyradio.com /Zen Glass, and you will be able to go to their page I've created for them, and they'll have a list of all their calendar of events and everything else going on. So definitely check those guys out. And speaking of that, I've been slowly kind of going through the website and playing around and finding different ways to make it more user-friendly. So you can just go to wiseguyradio.com. It'll actually forward you to wiseguymedia.com. And they have all the podcast archives. I'm getting everything organized on there for all of the resource information, the free downloads, PDFs, all the stuff that's going to help make it easier for you to organize your studio in terms of the business side of things, and also to help keep inventory up to date with your materials. That way, at the end of the year, when it comes to tax season, all you got to do is look at your references and your numbers. You'll know exactly how much material that you have for when you're doing your counts at the end of the year for leftover inventory and stock and all that kind of fun shit. So stay tuned. You can still go to wiseguymedia.com and check it out. I have a little contact button on there if you want any information or questions from myself personally. Just hit me up on there. And for all those of you out there who are participating in our Secret Santa pendant trade, thank you. Also, thank you for your patience as I've been working these kinks out and trying to really figure out the most beneficial way on my end as well as on your end to make this happen. And it seems like I got it all figured out. And for those of you who are participating, you know who you are. Thank you so much for participating. If it's you listening to this right now, thank you. You're amazing. Just kind of a side note on that being said, I have about a week and a half left of getting caught up on orders that I have through some of my retail stores as well as custom work. And once these orders are all done, I'm actually going to be hanging up my torch at home until the end of the year to really focus on the show and this space of Wise Guy Media. I really want to make sure that my energy that I'm focusing on is focused specifically on this, that I'm not thinking about all this other shit going on. And that way, too, when I'm also at Disney doing my glass there, I'm focused, and really all my energy that I have, that's the creative side of me, is going to be going into my work. Because now my and I don't know if it's just, I can't say it's a now thing, but my attitude has changed into where now I really am focusing on being the best at what I do, whether it's through sculpture, solid work, or hand-blown glass. And I'm not saying like I'm going to be the best in the world, but while I'm making and creating, the idea is to be the best that I can be at what it is that myself personally am doing. And I hope that you yourself, as you're listening to this and you're working on the torch and doing your thing, that you do the same thing. Don't try to be like the next guy, like a Yu Sheen or a Joe Peters or a Cesar Tofolo, or, you want to be you. And to be you is the most important part, which leads us into the segment of the show. Definitely hope you enjoy and get some good takeaways from this upcoming segment, which is all about the creative process and creative block when it comes to being an artist. All right, stay tuned. All right, thanks for hanging out, and welcome back to our segment here that we're going to be talking about the creative process. And this is just one way of going about it. I know there's lots of different ways of going about the creative process, and it all depends on your skill level that you have, which is kind of the most important part with regards of your foundation. For myself personally, this process that I'm about to share with you is what I do, and if you have issues or trouble with getting things out of your head and into your final product, then I recommend trying this process. And if anything, this just be maybe just something to listen to and something to think about, or to share with somebody that you know that is struggling when it comes to the creative process. There's lots of different areas and, like I said, different ways of going about this. But for me, these phases I feel are really a really easy way to go through the process of creating from your mind to final product in glass. I use the reference of this concept as well as when you're doing a performance, going from the creative process of a performance, whether it's in theater or some kind of act of some sort. So here's the 5 areas to take into consideration when dealing with artistic block or the creation process. Here's a simple question I have for you. Are you able to draw a sketch or thumbnail to help get the thoughts out of your head and onto paper? If you answered yes, then you are now able to transcribe your thoughts onto paper. The idea is to have the ability to engineer your art on paper first, to work out the details, and to think about the moves you will make to successfully get from point A to point Z, and in the end have a finished product. This will be the starting point in the creative process as you begin this journey of manifesting thoughts into reality. The thumbnail sketch is the first phase of 5 phases that I feel will help you simplify the creative process. Now, this isn't for everyone, as well as being the way I personally go through to find the right path through trial and error. In my opinion, this path will help alleviate some of the heartbreak that can come with artistic discovery. However, some may argue that to become a better artist, as well as finding your voice through your work, it is important to experience the heartbreak. However, a favorite quote of mine, to paraphrase, is, "The wise man learns from the mistake of others," or "the wise man learns from the mistakes of others." Throughout my art journey, I have learned from trial and error as well as from the mistakes of others. This is why this episode, in my opinion, is so important to take to heart. I hope to save you years of frustration and anguish from the mistakes I've made and learned from along the way. So phase 1 is to create the thumbnail sketch. When you do thumbnail sketches, you don't want to just do one, you want to do 10 or 20 and make them small. They call it thumbnail for a reason. The idea is to do something small, like the size of your thumbnail. Now, obviously, you don't need to go that small, but the idea is to do small sketches. If you have a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, you could fit 15, 20 sketches on there, and through those sketches, you look at them, and then you just cross out the ones that you don't like. If you're trying to figure out some kind of specific item you're going to be working through or what have you. The example I'll be using through this process of this talk is a recent item that I'm doing for Arribas Brothers, which is a manatee sculpture. And basically what I was given for my parameters was to make a manatee scene that takes an hour and a half to make. That was all I was given. And as we all know, when you're giving a general basic parameters like that, it can be very difficult at times to figure out which direction to go. So for myself, I took this idea and started on paper. I also did some research online, looking up different references of manatees in nature, their environment, etc., whether I wanted to go with a river scene or in the ocean. And I decided through the process to go with a river scene. So I was able to narrow down at least one specific area that I was going to go through as it came to doing my sketches. So once I knew that I wanted to use a river environment scene, then I could then on paper start to sketch out some manatees. The idea too I wanted was to have a mom and a calf manatee. So in most environments for manatees, they have cypress trees in the rivers, there's grass, etc. So I wanted to make sure I use those references and parameters per se in the creation process of my sketches. So on paper, I used the references I found online and did several different drawings of different layouts of a manatee and a calf with some trees and some grass. And oh, hey, honey. The wife's she's getting home. So, so that was kind of the idea, was to take and go through the process of just doing sketches on paper. And because I do enjoy drawing, it's always a fun thing to do. All right. Always the fun parts of life and recording when I'm recording at home. So to go back to what I was saying was the idea is now that I have the parameters set, manatee, mom, calf, some tree branches, maybe some stumps, some grass, that kind of stuff. I can then go through the process of doing my sketches on paper. And then from there, I can then begin the process of figuring out exactly scale and size, materials that I'm going to need to use, etc. Before then I start the process of actually physically creating this in glass. So phase 1 is sketches. Again, go through a piece of paper or 10 and just draw as many sketches as you need to. Whether you're making flowers, making pipes, making rigs, making chandeliers, whatever the hell it is you're making, and any kind of art, period. Paper first, engineer it on paper is the best way to go. So once you now have the ideas on paper as a reference, you can then begin the process in glass. And I recommend in phase 2 to go through the process of what I would consider to be a clear sketch. And I got this concept of a clear sketch from my friend Christian, who's a soft glass artist. He's an artist over at Zen Glass who teaches all their soft glass furnace work classes and workshops. And he showed me some ideas that he had of items he had worked through, trial and error wise, figuring out the shapes and stuff, all in clear. That way he wasn't worried about using any kind of color or potential materials. And it's not that it's a waste, it's just that it's easier to figure out things in clear because clear moves consistent, where color works differently. And we'll get more into that in the phase 3 as we talk about working with color. But in phase 2, you go through the process of creating a clear sketch. So going back to the manatee reference, what I did was I made my manatees in clear. I made the different sizes, a baby one and a bigger one, and made several of them just to really fine-tune and figure out what size and proportions I wanted to go with and all that, including the grass and, everything, the whole base, everything that they were going to be attached with, I did in clear. And then, you go from there. So the idea is when you're trying to figure out a direction to go, this tends to be the most affordable way to experiment with your thumbnail sketches that you created. With any new item, creating something in clear will shed some light on the right direction that you want to go. One of the benefits of creating your glass sketches in clear is you can rapidly cool these items, giving you a chance to hold them and study the piece from all directions. This will allow you to get a handle on the areas that you need to adjust and change to be more comfortable and also to function better, and that's some references to if you're making pipes. If you're doing just art, it just gives you better ideas to see different angles on composition and what works best and looks best from all directions. And as that whole cliche goes, sometimes it looks better on paper. And when it comes into glass, it could be the same way. Sometimes an idea, whether it's a pipe again or something sculpture, looks better on paper than actual piece that you make in glass. So this gives you a chance to really go through the process of just figuring out if this actually is going to work in general. Now, this also holds true for the idea of that looks better on paper based on the range of experience and technique that you have. And it doesn't mean that you need to give up if it doesn't work the first time. It just means that you have to make adjustments and find a way to make it look better in composition, and also, if you're making pipes again, to function better. And once you fine-tune your new item through these adjustments and trial and error, you now have a great reference to physically go to, as well as your drawings you first created. If needed, you can go back to the drawing board, per se, and fine-tune the work on paper again before getting to phase 3, which I would call the dress rehearsal. And in phase 3, it's a mock-up of your final product where you begin to apply color and to really figure out and fine-tune the process to make sure that your ideas that you have on paper with all the colors and ideas that you chose are actually going to work together and be compatible. So in phase 3 is a mock-up of the final product, and at this point you'll be adding color or use whatever products you have in mind to see how they work together, like I just kind of said. And this is if this is an item, for example, that will incorporate crushed opals, then you will have an item that will be your test run with those crushed opals, allowing you to see how the material works and whether or not you should even use it to begin in the first place. Because of the influx also of new materials, it's important to learn how specific materials work. Referring back to the crushed opals, if you've never worked with crushed opals before, this will be a trial run and an experiment using it. Glass color comes in different viscocities, which means the consistency of the material works and feels different from one color to the next. Some colors need specific flame settings and work better with similar colors. If you're using a color, for example, that reduces next to a color that doesn't, the two colors will work and feel differently, especially if you're trying to avoid the reduction of that specific color. When it comes to using different stuff for new projects, for example, like using cobalt blue, it's much easier to use the cobalt blue than it is lemon drop or any other cadmium color because, again, of consistency and viscosity of the color itself. So when referring back to your thumbnail sketches, think about the colors you're going to want to use and write them down on your pictures or your drawings using little lines that point to the areas of reference to where the color is going to go. When you get through this process of phase 3 as a successful dress rehearsal, it'll be time to begin phase 4. So with the manatee process, once I got the clear references all made, I then took those references and began the process to create ones in color. Now, my manatees that I make, I use a blue moon frit on the outside, which I had to figure out through trial and error which color was going to look the best and which type of color and what color to apply, whether to use rod and coat an entire piece of clear with the color to make it a solid color, or to go with a frit so it's going to leave a little speckle kind of textured look pattern in different colors. And for those of you who are familiar with Blue Moon has different variations in the blues and the grays that you can get out of it, which I think are awesome and actually work really well interpretation wise creating the manatees. And also, I had to figure out when doing this exactly how the base was going to be. I did several different variations of the base itself that the manatees and the branches and stuff were going to be mounted to make a sturdy, solid foundation for the piece to sit. And then once I figured out that in clear, then I went ahead and added color. For the bottom of the bases, I just add a little bit of butterscotch frit, which gives it a sandy bottom kind of look to it. And for these particular pieces that I'm doing for the Rebus Pillars at Disney, actually created the base to look like a Mickey silhouette. So for myself, as an artist there at Disney, it's kind of my hidden Mickey per se as the base, and something that you really wouldn't be able to tell until you actually pick the piece up and turned it upside down and looked at underneath the bottom of it, and you'll see that sure shit, it's Mickey's head. And I'll put these pictures of this item up here on the show notes so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, once I got that all figured out and figured out the size of the baby manatee and the size of the mom manatee and the composition and the angles, I then was able to go through and create all those in color and then assemble and then kind of go through the process of seeing how that would come out. And that leads us into phase 4. Now, the dress rehearsal is like anything else in stage performance. You go through a dress rehearsal. You maybe not know all your lines yet. You maybe don't know all your blocking or the lighting or the sound or etc. But by going through a dress rehearsal, it gives you a chance to fine-tune and figure all these things out. So now that you have this dress rehearsal done and completed, and this may take you 3 or 4 times to go through this process, again, because this is experimentation and really figuring out your materials, especially if you're new to the glass. If you're not new to the glass, you're still going to have some trial and error and experimentation as anything new that you work with or shape or design or concept. And by going through this now process of going in through color, and you have your final product that you're happy with that really speaks to the voice that you're trying to find in the piece, you now have a full color reference to hold in your hand physically to now study and look at that you'll now use for a reference to begin phase 4, which I will call opening night. Now, when phase 4 begins as the opening night, as any show goes, there are going to be bugs and potential issues that you run into that you will not necessarily know about. You may have come across during the dress rehearsal, but again, as any other good show out there, opening night, there tends to be some issue here and there that just pops up that you weren't expecting. And this process of phase 4 gives you a chance to go through and actually create the performance, in a sense, of opening night to really make sure that everything you went through in phase 1, 2, and 3 will come to fruition now, and you'll have a good final product in phase 4. So, as any opening night of a performance, there will be bugs that need to get worked out that may not come up during the dress rehearsal. Typically, phase 1, 2, and 3 are done in one day, while phase 4 should be done the next day. So the idea is that when you begin this process, the phases of 1, 2, and 3, you can do these all in one day. Phase 3 being your colored piece, you're going to want to have it go through a proper kiln cycle. This will make sure that the colors you're using are not going to crack and check on you. Again, if you're going to go back to the colored or the crushed opal reference before, crushed opals are very sensitive and have to go through a specific type of kiln cycling and handled properly. So certain colors are the same way. Through kiln cycles, you got to experiment with how long it should be in the kiln for. If you're using striking colors, how do you got to get them to strike, etc. And so phase 3 is exactly that, your dress rehearsal. You make the piece full color, you go through the process of running a kiln cycle, and then when you come back the next day, you can pull it out of the kiln, and then you can study, and then that's when you go into phase 4, which is now the actual full production and creation of the piece, along with finding out the bugs that may come up. And now by having phase 3 piece available to hold and study because you ran it through a kiln cycle, you can use this physical reference to create your final masterpiece. And so with the references I had with my manatee piece, it allowed me to look at the base. And in this particular dress rehearsal I did, I used a certain color that I thought was going to work great color-wise for the stump of a tree that I have with some roots and stuff on the base, kind of like an underwater kind of deal of a rotted tree. But come to find that the color I used wasn't really compatible with a couple other colors I was using, and so it caused some cracking issues. Now, the cracking issues could have been because of the color, could have been because of how it worked, maybe the flame flash I didn't realize, etc. There's little things and variations, as we all know, that come into glass blown and glass itself, and we got to pay attention to. So myself personally, when I went through the phase 3, I actually ran through it three times, I believe, that day. So when I came back the next day, I had 3 different variations, pretty close to the same look, to go through and figure out and fine-tune where issues were. So when it came to phase 4, I was able to go through the process of creating it, and hopefully the next day after pulling it out the kiln, there was no issues at all, and it looked like exactly how I wanted it to. And as any art or anything else, you're going to want to constantly evolve and constantly change and fine-tune and just find your voice even more so. But phase 4, again, is really just about finalizing the product. And once you get through the process of phase 4 and you're really happy with the final result, you can then begin phase 5, if you so choose to do phase 5, which I would consider to be the production phase. And in the production phase, it could be either, if this is a, say, low-end or a low-end, low-quality item that you're going to mass produce, or it could also be a high-quality piece that you're going to produce on a low volume. And this phase and this topic, I'm going to be getting into, delving into a lot deeper in an upcoming episode that is referring back to the 5-part series about selling and pricing your work. Part 5 of the series is exactly this, about the production side of things as we go through the process of creating work. Now, the creation process is what leads us up to the production side of things if you decide you want to make this item into production. Now, what I do with Erebus, everything we do there is production. It's one-of-a-kind items because they're handmade. But for instance, when I'm doing Olaf or doing a Disney character, they have to be almost identical every single time based on Disney's preference and what they approved. And for licensing the product, I can't change it, the pose, the look, the color, any of that kind of stuff. Once it's been approved, that's it. But when it comes into these other items like the manatee scene, for instance, I have a little bit more artistic freedom to add some things here and there, get a wild hair, type of things. You can just kind of spice it up a little bit if you want. But by going through these first 4 phases, it's going to really give you specifically a direction to go in and allow you to find your voice and to create your thought and manifest it into a physical item that you will then be happy and be able to sell. So I hope this ideas and concepts really helps you, and to kind of go back and go over it one more time. The first phase of the process of the creation is the thought, and the thought then goes onto paper. And so to kind of combine the two together, you go from thought to thumbnail. And then you go from the thumbnail into phase 2, which is your clear sketching glass. And from that clear sketching glass, you fine-tune your items, your look, what you're going for, shape, size, function, comfortability, composition, etc. From phase 2, you then go into phase 3, which I call your dress rehearsal, where you run through when you figured out, again, which colors you want to use and what materials you want to use and what areas that you want to use it in. And then you run through this process 2 or 3 times to really figure out where this is going to lead you to. And ideally, if you can do phase 1, 2, and 3 all in one session, by then the next day you come into the studio, and now you can begin phase 4 because you have a physical reference. And phase 4, I'm going to consider to be opening night. And opening night, as always, there's bugs to work out that just come up that you weren't expecting or didn't think about in phase 3 of the dress rehearsal. And in phase 4, you go through the process of actually going from A to Z of the creation of the process and the product. Now, in phase 4, just to kind of back up to that, what you can also do, if you feel the need to, you can go through the process of doing one picture, like a drawing sketch, of your final item that you're going to be making, to use that as your final reference drawing. It's kind of an idea. But definitely hold on to your thumbnails, because those thumbnails that you did might be things that you can make later on down the road, or something that you might find you can use for references for tweaking your items that you're making. So phase 1 is thumbnail sketches. Phase 2 is clear sketching glass. Phase 3 is trial run using materials, color, crushed opal, etc. And then phase 4 is the actual creating the final piece that speaks of your voice, of what it is you wanted to say from the thought that you had at the very beginning of all this. And then phase 5 will be getting it into production, because you now have the engineering process already done in phase 1 and 2, like any kind of building that you create. And you can now figure out how to put it into production, which again I'm going to get into later down the road episode. So I hope this helps you in your creative process, and if you come up with any kind of creative block, that this helps you get out of that block. And on the next episode, series that we'll be doing, I'll be going through phase 5 of the production, and which is going to be low-end production and high volume versus high-end production and low volume. And again, I apologize for background noises and distractions and sounds. Just life here at the home of the Burkholzer residence. So thanks for tuning in, And if you definitely go through this process, I would love to see pictures, which you can send me photos, info@wiseguyradio.com. You can also tag me on your Instagram or your Facebook page if you put them up there. Please do that. My Instagram is @jmichaelglass. It's @JMICHAEL Glass. And other than that, enjoy the evening. Happy melting. And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. Love you. Take care. Peace. This episode is also brought to you by C-Cube Co. C-Cube now creates a wide range of specialty and one-of-a-kind artistic glassware, items such as hand-blown wine crafts, insulated coffee mugs, pint glasses, and custom piggy banks that you can have personalized with imprinting logos and color accents that are available. Just go to ccubeco, that's SEACUBECO.com for more information. That's ccubeco.com. This episode is also brought to you by The Flow magazine. Since its inception, the focus of The Flow has been to provide a bond among members of the lampworking community. This has been accomplished by developing relationships with the finest artists and sharing their techniques with you through in-depth, step-by-step tutorials. In every issue, you can enjoy great content with the hottest artists and cutting-edge techniques using the latest industry products. These features, along with the continuation of the Women in Glass edition, Glasscraft Emerging Artist Awards, inspiring gallery showcases, dynamic general interest articles, as well as health and safety information, make The Flow the leading international lampworking journal. For more information or to subscribe to The Flow, go to theflowmagazine.com. That's theflowmagazine.com. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. If you have any questions, comments, or remarks, please leave them in the show notes page area where it says comments. We'll see you soon. Have a wise night.
You're listening to the Wise Guy